Aslam, Ma Barker, was one of the legendary American criminals of the Public Enemy era. While her gang's exploits were headline news at the time, Barker's notoriety has since subsided, trailing behind John Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde. The popular view of Ma Barker as the gang's leader and its criminal mastermind has been called a myth. It was not until after Ma Barker's death that she became known as the brains behind the infamous Barker Karpis gang. There were only Ma Barker and her boys once she was in the grave. Ma Barker was a pudgy, 5'2", Bible-reading fiddle player whom enjoyed hillbilly songs and crossword puzzles, and a mother of 4. All of whom grew up to be deadly criminals. It was the FBI that gave Ma the prestigious but undeserved title of leader of the pack, claiming that she was the mastermind behind her son's jobs. According to the Bureau, she was the engineer of the escape routes, whom then waited at home in prayer for her sons to return with the loot. The theory was never proven, and Ma was in actual fact never even charged with a crime. No evidence ever surfaced linking her as an active participant in her boys' endeavours. Rather, her role was to take care of gang members, whom often sent her out to the movies while they committed their crimes. The FBI insisted, however, that Ma played a major criminal role, and they nicknamed her Bloody Mary. Ma's life began simply enough. She was born Arizona Donnie Clark in 1872, part of a poor family whom lived in the Ozark Hills near Springfield, Missouri. Friends called her Kate. In 1892, at the age of 20, she married George Barker, a farm laborer. The couple lived in a tar-papered shack in a small Missouri town not far from where Kate had been born. She gave birth to 4 sons: Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, and Freddie. Her husband, George, had a drink problem. He abandoned the family shortly after Freddie was born. The kids were badly behaved and became juvenile delinquents. They began their criminal careers with petty crimes, but eventually graduated to bank and train robbers. The 2 oldest Barker boys, Herman and Lloyd, are thought to have been part of the Central Park Gang, which was based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, from around 1915. Herman had already been arrested several times for highway robberies, while Arthur Barker began a not altogether successful career as a bank robber in the early 1920s and 22. In 22, Arthur was imprisoned for the murder of James J. Sherrill, a night watchman in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the previous year. He was not to be released for 10 years. Throughout the 1920s, the Barker boys that were still at large were involved in plethora of robberies and heists. All this time, their mother professed she did not believe the stories she heard about her sons. "Lies and all lies, you're all lying against my boys," she shouted at the federal officers as they arrested one of her sons yet again. It was a classic case of mother's self-protective denial flying in the face of all evidence. During 1927, Herman was stopped by police following a bank heist in Wichita, Kansas, just over the Missouri-Kansas state line. Rather than to be taken into custody, Herman turned his gun on himself, committing suicide. Then, in 1932, Lloyd was sent away to the United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth, Kansas, to serve a 25-year term for robbing mail in Baxter Springs, Kansas. Fred Barker had also been arrested and served time between 1927 and 31. During his time inside, he had met Alvin "Creepy" Karpis, whom had been convicted of a car theft. Alvin was the son of Lithuanian immigrants, was said to have a photographic memory, and had gained his nickname from his smile, supposedly a sinister sight. Upon the pair's release, they teamed up, formed a gang, and committed a series of successful bank robberies. Although Herman Barker was dead and Lloyd was in prison, Arthur rejoined his brother Fred in the gang in late 1932. The Barker Karpis gang turned to kidnapping in 1933. Their first victim was William Ham, the rich owner of Ham's Beer, and they got away with $100,000 in ransom money. but the kidnapping of Edward G. Bremer, a wealthy Minnesota businessman, was to prove the gang's downfall. Although the kidnapping was successful, the gang scored a large ransom and released Bremer unharmed. It was an affront too far. The Bureau redoubled their efforts to take the gang down. They arrested Arthur Barker on 8 January 1935 on Chicago. They then managed to track down the matriarch of the Barker clan via letters that she had sent. The G-men, dressed in black suits and armed with Tommy guns, surrounded a 2-story house in Ocklawaha, a small Florida community, on 16 January 1935. They called out to Ma Barker, telling her that if she and her son surrendered, no one would get hurt. Instead, Freddie fired shots from the second floor. Federal agents returned fire and 6-hour gun battle ensued with 14 FBI agents. When it was over, the feds had pumped 100 rounds into the dwelling. Afterward, all was quiet. An agent went in, then quickly returned. "They're dead," he shouted. With that, the G-men broke out in applause. At least that's how the tale has been handed down. Kate and Freddie bullet-riddled bodies remained for 8 months at Ocala Funeral Parlor, waiting to be claimed. While there, FBI agents were photographed with bodies. Eventually, George Barker, Ma's estranged husband, went to the mortuary and arranged for the burial of Kate and his son Freddie in Welch, Oklahoma. During 1936, the FBI arrested Alvin Karpis in New York, Orleans. 3 years later, Arthur Barker was fatally shot during the attempted escape from the federal prison on Alcatraz Island off the coast of Northern California. Lloyd, the only surviving Barker's son, was released from prison 1947 after serving out his 25-year sentence. 2 years later, his wife shot and killed him in their home in Westminster, Colorado. For the crime, his wife was sent to an insane asylum. Caption reads, Karpis on Ma. Alvin Creepy Karpis is one of the most authoritative voices to have attempted to dispel the myth that Ma Barker was the leader of the gang, and he should know the most ridiculous story in the annals of crime is that Ma Barker was the mastermind behind the Karpis Barker gang, he stated. She wasn't a leader of criminals or even a criminal herself. There is not one police photograph of her to set or set of fingerprints taken while she was alive. She knew we were criminals, but her participation in our careers was limited to one function. When we traveled together, we moved as mother and her sons. What could look more innocent?